Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharya Shil Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Zagaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham ki jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Samveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Haribo. I am not doing it. Hare Krishna, welcome. Thank you for coming. Shraddha, I think these seats are set apart pretty wide. Going to have a crunch problem later. This is product placement. Welcome everyone who's come to ISV this morning and all those who have joined us online. And where are you coming from? Atlanta. What is your name? Dina Dayal Madhava Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Welcome. Let's please welcome Dina Dayal Madhava Prabhu. Yes, we have Bhakta Thomas has come all the way from Idaho. Please welcome. Hare Krishna. And where are you coming from? And what is your name? Rangadevi. Please welcome Rangadevi. Hare Krishna. And today we also have the original Madhukari Prabhu. Hare Krishna. And his wife-to-be within a few hours, Savitri Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna. Today we'll be having a wedding at 11 o'clock. Thank you. You came all the way out for the wedding? Yes. Good for you. It's good to come out for that. Maybe just move up a few, because it'll get a little more populated here. Can you give some kartals to Dina Dayal? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. You just notice at the top of the Bhaktivedanta Veda base, a treasure of spiritual knowledge. Look above that. You have English, Espanol. What's the next one? Chechnya. Can you speak that? Okay, today's class will be in Chechnyan. You translate. Then we have what? Russian, Portuguese, Netherlands. What do you speak in the Netherlands? Dutch, okay, so we'll have in Chechnyan Dutch today. Double translated. Then, what's that? Zulu. I speak a little Zulu. I admit, I was just in Africa. I learned how to distribute a book in Zulu. Dansk. Huh? Denmark. Esti. What is that? Estonia. And Somni. German. What's in it? Latvian? Can you speak that? No. Slovenian. Let's hear it for Slovenia. Come on. I want to hear it for our friends in Slovenia. And then Slovenian, China. And what do we have for the last one? It's Tamil. Can you speak Tamil? No? But it's remarkable. If you can see this, how the sound vibration expands with sincere endeavor. It's a painstaking effort to bring even one word into another language. And now it's in many different languages going all over the world. There's the flow of the sound vibration that came from Krishna's flute gets passed down. Shukadeva Goswami spoke it. Now everyone's talking about it. And the vibration that's been recorded in a very handy way goes out in these little containers. And in the most remarkable places you wouldn't expect. People start talking about the Bhagavatam. I was at a table in Santa Cruz several years ago, and a very disheveled homeless man came up, looking quite mad, and was just staring at the book table. So I tried to engage him, and I said, how are you? And he goes, I know something about this. And I said, oh, really? What do you know? And then he stood up really straight, and he recited with perfect pronunciation the entire first verse of the Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasaya Tonvayad. And then I tried to inquire a little bit more from him, but he was so mad that he turned around and walked away. And I was just thinking how many streams this sound vibration has broken into, and how it's reached out to touch so many people in all different modes of nature. So today we'll do a little review of certain sections of the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, if that's okay with you. And Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First very instructive and touching section I'd like to look at today, not only would I like to, I'm going to attempt to do it, is in the 4th canto, 3rd chapter, starting with text number 21. It's 4:3:21. Does anybody know what this chapter is? So, yeah, it has to do with the Daksha Yajna, which is, I saw a few years ago some of the younger devotees in Los Angeles did a play to reenact the Daksha Yajna because they thought it to be topical. It never goes out of style. The Daksha Yajna where one party became annoyed, to say the least, with the other party, and then began fighting, and then it ended up in total destruction. And sometimes helpful to watch that from the outside, and as a warning to what can happen, escalating violence and so forth. So amidst this, there's some important dialogue about between Shiva, to start with here, and his wife Parvati. So what's happening is her father, Daksha, is holding a big soiree, big yajna, which is the place to be. And she wants to go, but there's a conflict of interest because Daksha, although Sati's father, is inimical towards Shiva. Have you ever seen this? Where there's within the family, there's a difference of opinion about the son-in-law. Ever heard of it? I've seen it. Sometimes there's strain between various members of the family. So this is happening here between Sati and her father, because her father really didn't like Lord Shiva. After all, he's not your ideal son-in-law. He wears ashes on his body, and he doesn't really care for any residents. And, the ashes represent the fact that he's just always reminding himself and others that the body's going to end up as ashes anyway. Om krato smara kritam smara, krato smara kritam smara, as it says in the Sri Upanishad, this temporary body will be burned to ashes, let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. So he warns her, he's warning her, don't go. Don't go to this yajna, because what will happen is you'll go there and your father will insult you as a way of insulting me, and there'll be an offense. And you'll become so disturbed because of that, that you'll actually suffer a kind of death. And literally she does. She immolates herself with her mystic potency, burns up the body that was given to her by Daksha. Acharyas say then she immediately takes birth in the next womb where she'll appear again. But it's a dangerous situation. So here's on 4:3:21 the words of Lord Shiva to his wife. One who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed both mentally and sensually cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I found that to be striking. That being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons, that is, those who are advanced themselves. Doesn't like to see it because he can't rise. So this is Shiva talking about Daksha, indirectly saying, because he's a materialist. Now, the word daksha, his name daksha means he's expert. What's he expert at? Being a materialist, basically, because he's a progenitor. He's very much absorbed in making lots and lots of children. So there's a way in which that preoccupation sort of obscures one's ability to be fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Then, in 22, he says, Shiva says, "My dear young wife, certainly friends and relatives offer mutual greetings by standing up, welcoming one another, and offering obeisances. But those who are elevated to the transcendental platform, being intelligence, offer respects to the supersoul who is sitting within the body, not to the person who identifies with the body." 23, "I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead known as Vasudeva is revealed without any covering. Therefore you should not see your father, although he is the giver of your body, because he and his followers are envious of me. Because of his envy, O most worshipful one, he has insulted me with cruel words, although I am innocent. If, in spite of this instruction, you decide to go, neglecting my words, the future will not be good for you. You are most respectable, and when you are insulted by your relative, this insult will immediately be equal to death." So, just as a general principle, there are a couple general principles here. One is what was mentioned, that in offering obeisances, one sees that he or she is offering obeisances to the supersoul within the body, not to the person who's attached to the body. And therefore, one may offer obeisances universally in that case. And another principle is that one has to avoid the envious in teaching Krishna consciousness. This is a principle with many a nuance. And especially it's brought out in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the description of the various levels of devotees. Of course, first of all, is mentioned the Mahabhagavata, who sees how Krishna is within everything and how the universe is working uniformly. And therefore, practically, there's nothing to teach, because everything that Mahabhagavata sees, everyone he sees as engaged already in Krishna consciousness or serving Krishna, because even by serving Maya, one's ensconced in the material energy, which is also Krishna's energy. Then there's the middle-class devotee who's described, Ishvare taradineshu balisheshu dvisatsucha prema maitri kripopeksha yakaroti samadhyamaha. And the Madhyama Adhikari, middle class, is one who sees four entities. Ishvara, which means Krishna, the Supreme Controller, and he sees the devotees. He can recognize what's a devotee. Then he sees the innocent, Bali Sheshu. They're like, Bali Sheshu means Bali is like a child. It's like innocent like a child. And Dvisatsu, those who are envious of the Lord. They don't even like the idea that the people are out and about teaching about God. They'll take exception to it immediately and make some counter-arguments in an envious way. So then the scripture, and this is coming from Kavi Havi Yogendra? Okay, could look it up. Says one should act, the Madhyama Adhikari interacts with these four different kinds of, and with these four entities in appropriate ways, different and appropriate ways. So with Krishna, one gives prema, one develops love for Krishna. For the devotees, one develops appropriate kinds of friendships, relationships of friendship. Havi. Kavi Havi Antariksha Prabhuda Pipalayana Avirhotra Drumala Chamasa and Karbhajana are the Nava-yogendras, and this is Havi Yogendra, so the second one who speaks to Maharaj Nimi, and he's giving these principles of the various levels of devotees. So then towards the Krishna love, devotees, friendship, then towards the innocent gives mercy, kripa. And towards the envious, and here's coming to the point, upeksha, which means he's indifferent. Okay, I'll say the entity and then you say the word that goes with it. Krishna. Devotees. Innocent. Envious. Yeah. So that's the idea. This is the teaching. And so the Madhyama Adhikari is considered the preacher, as we say, or the one who goes out and teaches Krishna consciousness here, there, and everywhere. A topmost devotee, who I described, who doesn't feel the need to teach because he sees everyone's engaged in Krishna's service, can come down, or often does come down, sometimes comes down to the second-class platform to engage in the world and to spread Krishna consciousness. So this, there's a purport to the verse, Ishvare Tadadineshu, which has, it's lengthy, but I'm going to skim it and pick out some of the points given by the acharyas, which will astound you when you hear these. They're so important and nuanced that it will give you an edge in your Krishna consciousness, because knowing how and when and to whom to preach, how to teach Krishna consciousness, what circumstances to hold back, and having a clear idea when it's okay, when it's not okay, is very important in teaching Krishna consciousness. And we're getting this lesson via the great acharyas. So the verse is 11:2:47. Havi Yogendra says, an intermediate or second-class devotee called Madhyama Adhikari offers his love to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is a sincere friend to all the devotees of the Lord, shows mercy to ignorant people who are innocent, and disregards those who are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's a long purport. I'd like to read the whole thing, but I don't have time because I have several more points to make. And I'm jumping down to the second paragraph. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, although a second-class devotee is eager to preach to the innocent conditioned souls, he should avoid the atheistic class of men so that he will not become disturbed or polluted by their association. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has confirmed that a Vaishnava should be indifferent to those who are envious of the Supreme Lord. It is practically seen that when such persons are informed of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they attempt to ridicule the Supreme Lord, thus further deteriorating their polluted existence. Has that ever happened to anyone here? When you attempted to teach somebody about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they acted in an adverse way. Who said yes? Do you remember a specific instance? Is it seared into your consciousness? Traumatized, are you? You want to tell us what happened? We're here for you. Microphone, please.
Well, this is an example of how a prad is made. So, he was a Mayavadi and a very elderly person, even elder to my father. And then typical Indian thing that, I know everything. And then, everything is one and we're all God and those things. And then I said, Krishna clearly says, offer everything to me and, bow down to me. And then he said, Krishna is so arrogant that he's speaking like that. Who is Krishna to say like that? And then I said, there's no point in, discussing this further. I mean, it's in a complete wrong direction and complete aparad. I'm wasting my time and he's doing aparad. So, yeah.
Where was that?
That was at a family dinner function.
A family dinner. This is very similar. This is going door to door. Sometimes we meet people. I could say one instance, we were out with a large party of devotees door to door, and I met a man. It was about 11 in the morning. He came out with his bathrobe on, and I showed him the book. Actually, he opened the door, he came out, and he kept it partly open, but he was standing in front of the door on the outside, because apparently he didn't want to close the door on me yet, but he also didn't want me to come in or keep the door open to what was going on inside. But when I showed him the book, he said, "Oh yes, I know everything." And from there it was all downhill, because they already knew everything. But I did call all the devotees and say, "You got to get up here, because I just met a man who knows everything." They were fascinated by him. Any other instances where you met somebody who was radically inimical? Madhukar?
Anyone who is radically inimical. But I met someone just the other day who was an atheist, and I asked that person, "Well, why are you atheist? Why don't you believe in God?" And they said, "Well, there's no proof for God." And well, then I said, "Well, there's no proof that there isn't God, is there?" So then it just kind of went on from there.
No proof there isn't God. I'd be interested to hear the details. Anyone else? Yes? Shraddha.
So, Maharaj, mine is a happy story. I'm going to tell about the Santa Cruz guy that we met when we were out on book distribution.
I think you better save that for another section, because okay. This is like walking away. Okay. I think there is a section here where we can apply that. Okay. So there is all permission in the Shastra that when you meet somebody who's offensive, who reacts with disdain, when you indicate that you represent the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His devotees, and that you trying to present, that you have to become expert in disengaging. And here's some of the reasons. There's more. This is in the third paragraph. Srila Jiva Goswami has mentioned that although the first-class devotee of the Lord may at times exhibit apparent hatred toward the demons because of entering the mood of the Lord's pastimes, the intermediate devotees should avoid such feelings. Furthermore, the intermediate devotee should not in any way associate with the powerful atheistic class of men, because there is danger that his mind will become bewildered by such association. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, if a Vaishnava preacher encounters one who is envious of him, the preacher should remain far away. Where should he be? Far away. From such an envious person. But the Vaishnava preacher may meditate upon ways to save the envious class of men. Such meditation is called the Sat Achar, or saintly behavior. And then to prove that, he gives this verse from Prahlad Maharaj, Naivod Vijay Paraduratya Vaitaranyas, in which Prahlad Maharaj is lamenting for the conditioned souls who are just wasting their time in the material world, carrying a heavy burden. And he says, I'm concerned with love for them. I want to try to help them. He's meditating on them. So it's not that we're indifferent and that there's no concern whatsoever. There's a way in which, even if one remains far away or avoids the person who's envious, one can still go on meditating how such a person might come to Krishna consciousness. And moving down again to the below where that verse is, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that even Bharata Maharaj, Vyasadeva, and Shukadev Goswami do not exhibit their mercy indiscriminately. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given an elaborate explanation to prove that the discrimination employed by a Madhyama Adhikari preacher does not at all show lack of mercy. He states that upeksha, or neglect, as mentioned in this verse, is the proper medicine for those who are inimical to the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Indifference from the preacher checks feelings of hostility on both sides. Although there is a Vedic injunction that one should cut out the tongue of a person who offends the Supreme Lord and his devotees, in this age it is best simply to avoid potential offenders and thus prevent them from committing further sinful activities against the Vaishnavas. Over the years, I can say that I've met a lot of people who announce themselves early on as not being in favor of what I was presenting in different ways. And I learned, partly by trial and error and by painful process of encountering such people, before having a lot of this information, that it's best to disengage as quickly as possible when detecting that. For instance, sometimes people, although they believe in God, they have a particular, they're very sectarian. And when they see that you have a specific presentation, they may then become envious of that presentation, or have their own very strong agenda. For instance, I've met, of course, teaching in America, distributing books in America, I've met a lot of people in the Christian faith who have been particularly pointed about their disdain for what I'm presenting and so forth. So in those cases, over years, I've evolved a system where if I show a book, for instance, on Sankirtan, and then someone begins to reveal to me that they want to preach to me in no uncertain terms, then instead of getting into a protracted debate about it, in most cases, when I sense that it's an intractable situation, I'll say, they'll say, do you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ? Have you accepted him as your personal Savior? Something like that, which is sort of a mantra. And then I would say, I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing. It's people like you who are people of faith like you who are keeping the world afloat. Without you, we'd have no hope, and I thank you very much. And then after having given some appreciation for their faith, which should be there, then I disengage as quickly as possible. And I find that that follows the spirit of this verse, to not be indiscriminate, but to see where there's an opening. And if there's no opening for one reason or another, then it's best to disengage and move on. So Shiva's telling Parvati, Sati, not to go into this situation because there's going to be envy there. And there's more. I like that neglect equals medicine. That's there in the purport. So it is a kind of teaching. It is a kind of way of preaching, is to neglect. Tender, loving neglect, we call. Tender, loving neglect. In other words, you neglect, but it's not that you walk away hatefully, but you walk away appreciating that you didn't muddy the waters more or agitate the person, have them commit more offense or waste your time. Furthermore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this is much further along in the purport if you can find it, has strongly rejected those foolish persons who, under a plea of mercy and equal vision, perceive that a faithless person is also a devotee of the Supreme Lord, and who thus try to thrust the Harinam or holy name of God upon such offensive people. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has stated, when childless people think themselves Mahabhagavatas and act in defiance of the Vaishnava spiritual master, such behavior simply holds them back from receiving the mercy of the Vaishnava Guru. So on the other side, someone might say, oh, no, I see everybody as a devotee. Therefore, I will preach to everybody, no matter, even if they're envious or they're angry or they're intractably sectarian. I'll force it on them. They have to have it. This is not approved by the acharyas, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and it's an artificial situation. So one can fully study the position of a Madhyama Adhikari, and even if you're a Mahabhagavata, if you're out preaching, then you should see what is the strategy. And one of the strategies is to be upeksha, or learn how to be tactfully indifferent from people. Not that you also break it off with people in such a way that they become more angry and just, forget you. That's not what it means. It means, as a means of preaching, the indifference means to leave no residue with the person that you're talking to. Leave them clean, break away, like in training for being a lifeguard. Teach people how, when you go to save somebody who's drowning in the water, if they start to drag you under, you're taught to actually disengage with the person before you get drowned. And there's ways in which to break it off with the person. So we should also break it off with people who are going to drown us in different ways, but we can do so tactfully. Again, pure devotees, therefore, in all circumstances, display indifference to those who falsely imagine themselves to be Vishuddha Bhaktas or pure devotees of the Lord. This indifference is an excellent manifestation of their mercy. Isn't that nice? Indifference is an excellent manifestation of their mercy. So you can consider that. This is Shastric. Srila Jiva Goswami, further down, has pointed out that even though a Mahabhagavat devotee may act on the second-class platform for preaching, his rejection of the envious living entities does not obstruct his vision of the Lord as all-pervading. Rather, when a first-class devotee or even a second-class devotee rejects the atheistic class of men, he is expressing the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Madhukari Prabhu.
I have a question about, which may relate to this. Like sometimes when we go try to give people books, distribute books to people, and they're atheists, and they say so, we can still figure out how to get them to take a book and give a donation and stuff. And so when they take it, and they read it, they may realize that they've been tricked. So what would you say about that?
I'd say it requires expertise. There's a fine-tuning for the preacher to feel from the heart how one's presentation is going to affect somebody else. And so when presenting something, even if you're doing it in a crafty way so that they walk away with it, one should have a feeling for what the result may be later on. There is one way of looking at it, and that is that it's absolute. And therefore, the good outweighs the bad, and no matter what happens, the bad will gradually dissipate and the eternal benefit will persist. That's one way of looking at it. And it's not unbona fide. In fact, sometimes Prabhupada looked at it that way. Oftentimes, when devotees in the very beginning of the movement were untrained, unskilled, and went out. Of course, no one's completely untrained or unskilled because Prabhupada said that Krishna teaches us from within. But in maybe immature ways in presenting, I often perceived that we were inoculating people, and once they were inoculated, then we were done with them. And we didn't care for any of the extra care that we could give people because we thought, okay, they got the shot, they're ready to go. Push them off now. But more expert preachers will consider the follow-through. And why are they more expert? Because they have more experience and they see what happens. What's the result from their preaching? They see that sometimes people come back and express themselves in different ways, and they go, oh, actually, what I say and do does make a difference. The way I say it makes a difference also. So a person may become more sensitive. So in the a particular case you're mentioning of somebody who's atheistic, And you may be able to say, oh, well, this is perfect for an atheist. I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by, convincing them, how you trick them to take a book, but I do know I've seen instances where I think Vijay reported either he or someone else was going door to door in Australia or New Zealand, and somebody opened the door and said, "Oh, this is not for me. I worship Satan." He said, "Well, this is perfect for you. Don't you want to know about the competition?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're right. I think I'll take it." That sort of expertise in thinking ahead helps. And not just that, one would say, "Oh yeah, this is a guidebook to atheism," or something like that. And then someone says, "Oh, actually it's not." But it is. I mean, you could say it's everything. So you just have to be sensitive and consider, what might happen later on. If you say something that is not, that can't be connected, and that's so disjointed that they will consider that it was, an out-and-out lie or something like that. Srivas Pandit can help me out here.
I could be wrong, but once we were distributing books in front of Walmart, a person said, he looked at Bhagavad Gita and said, "No, I'm an atheist, I don't want to take this book." I said, "Well, this book actually tells you that there is no God for those who don't believe in Him." "Oh, really? Yeah, I'll take that."
So that's a kind of expertise. There was a way in which Prabhupada was talking about how there was, in the 1970s, there was a so-called energy shortage. And Prabhupada was saying there is no energy shortage. Krishna's unlimited energy. So this is artificially created by human society and the way that we're organizing our economic systems. And so there was one devotee who was out selling books. He was a brahmachari, Tripurari Das at the time, now Swami. But he was selling BTGs and said, "Yeah, read all about it. There's no energy shortage. Yeah, God, it's right in here. No energy shortage at all." And people were buying because it was a big concern to people at the time. And when Prabhupada heard about it, he said, "This is very expert kind of presentation." So, yes?
And one last point is Srila Prabhupada himself encouraged that, like just a mother packs the tablet in a sweetmeat and gives it to the child.
Yeah. And so you have to see, I mean, it's hard to imagine a situation where, it would be an outright trickery or something like that would make them consider that, you just presented something as a lie, it was a lie or something like that. I don't think you have a problem, Madhukari, with that. But you're asking for others, and I appreciate it. So, finally, in the penultimate paragraph, Madhyama Adhikaris, however, should not imitate such Uttama Adhikari behavior. In this connection, the distinction between Madhyama Adhikari and Uttama Adhikari is stated by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur as follows. A Madhyama Adhikari cannot at any time perceive the presence of the Supreme Lord within all living beings, whereas an Uttama Adhikari, however he acts on the second-class platform to carry out the Lord's mission, is aware that every living entity is ultimately a forgetful Krishna-conscious entity. Therefore, although a devotee may externally engage in 4 different types of behavior, as mentioned in this verse, namely worship of the Lord, friendship with the devotees, preaching to the innocent, and rejection of the demons, he is not necessarily on the second-class platform, since an Uttama Adhikari also may exhibit these symptoms to carry out the Lord's mission. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentions that it is the duty of the Madhyama Adhikari to extend himself as the right hand of the Uttama Adhikari, vowing to work for the benefit of others and offering to help in distributing love of Krishna. So, this verse, 11.247, has a lot more in it. I just touched a few points, but the principle is that in preaching Krishna consciousness, one has to observe carefully the categories of people that one's meeting, and then appropriately interact with them. We'll take just a few reflections. Anything that you heard, any principle that you heard that stuck in your mind that you find useful. And then we'll move on to the next point. Thomas.
I like the phrase, indifference is an excellent manifestation of mercy. So by disengaging, you're actually preventing the person from further offending Krishna or his devotees. So it's a great mercy to do that.
Yes. It's a kind of medicine. Nice. Madhukari Prabhu.
I like the one about when there's envious people and you disengage from them. It's not without love.
Yeah, in fact, he mentions that it's sat achar to disengage, but at the same time meditate on how one might help them. And he quotes Prahlad Maharaj, Naivo Dvijay para daratya vaitaranyas. Twadvirya gayana maha mrignam magnachitaha. Shoche tato vimuka. So he says, Shoche tato vimuka chetasa indriyarta. Shoche, I'm lamenting. Although, I'm lamenting for those. I'm feeling concern. I'm thinking about, how people are suffering and how I can help them. Thank you. Yes.
About tender neglect, you had mentioned
Tender loving neglect.
Tender loving neglect. You had or
TLN
just,
rather than TLC.
Or even just purposeful neglect in general. You had mentioned in one of the lectures where you were talking about Chidrakta, and he said this is one of the things. And another one was there were three, right? There was insult, and then neglect, and there was a third one that helps grow the Chidrakta. So I was thinking about that.
Yeah, so she's referring to a quote I included in my book that's from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who said that the spiritual body, Chid Sharira, is nourished by spiritual blood, Chidrakta. And spiritual blood is produced when one feels the friction from preaching and meets people who neglect you, they neglect you, they insult you, and one other thing. What? And misunderstand. So don't think that by mixing it up with the world, you're actually in a disadvantageous situation. Actually, it's the opposite. And in fact, I heard the other day from Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu that one of the main principles for advancement in spiritual life is getting a friction from sadhus. It's a sort of related point. But he said, when you're around a real sadhu, it can actually be rather disturbing, caustic sometimes. Sometimes people say, oh, I wish I was there with Prabhupada, I could have been with him all the time. And you can ask any of the servants who were with Prabhupada, they say, it was really hard. It's like everyone says, oh, what a sweet service. Like, no, it wasn't. It was very difficult. Prabhupada was, first of all, you have to put your ego aside and put somebody else completely in the center. It's nothing about you. You're completely the servant. I mean, when you go home and with your family and everything, I'm completely renounced and everything, but I'm still in the center. But when you're with a sadhu, then, it's all about the sadhu. Of course, he's not thinking that. He's thinking it's all about Krishna, but that's why I'm in the material world, because I'm thinking it's all about me. But that kind of friction and any kind of chastisement one may get actually helps one grow. That spiritual blood comes from that. So if you're the smartest one in the room or the most advanced one in the room, you're in the wrong room. Get in those kinds of rooms where people are smarter, people are more advanced, and feel the pain. Feel the pain of it, thinking like, why aren't I advanced? And, taking the heat. It's that heat that helps us to grow. And in preaching also, when we're meeting people and they chastise us, we should consider that this is Krishna chastising me. Krishna is speaking through this person because I'm such a rascal. He's sent me out, and now I'm meeting these atheists and whatever to chastise me. And internally we can consider like that. And then disengage from them. You have a point? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for that tender, loving neglect.
Tender, loving neglect.
Yeah, that is
By the way, I just wanted to mention that I learned that phrase from Jamuna's mother, because Jamuna's mother is an expert at growing orchids. Orchids are so nice, beautiful, but it takes a special care to grow orchids. And I learned it from her mother, and she said the trick is tender, loving neglect. Don't fuss over them too much. If you give them too much water, they'll immediately die. If you mess around with them too much, they just like to be put in a corner and left alone. So then they grow nicely.
I also practically experienced sometime with colleagues. It might be like intense heat happen, but then I just get and I did not more further pushed, and I got back. But I saw that over the period, actually, that given me more opportunity to think about them, how I can help them, and also it actually challenge, and that's what like a spiritual bird. And actually, that's a good thing. And if someone is opposing, then you don't directly tell, but actually then it gives more opportunity to serve, and also to see that where your false ego is there or is what is there, because most of the time is false ego get hurt first, that if someone doesn't accept. But if you see again and again that person, then you remind, oh yeah, Krishna want to get your false ego down, and then help the...
So it's conceivable that you're in a situation where you see people every day, you want to teach them about Krishna consciousness, but you can't because they're not open to it. You could consider that you're not telling them about Krishna consciousness in that situation is actually preaching according to this principle. And that paradoxically, I've found over the years, the more one is detached and takes the attitude that I will come as closely as I can and offer as compellingly as I can, but I'll still be detached and let them make the move. Individual, spontaneous, and voluntary, Prabhupada said, this is the way to manage. Even amongst devotees, he said, don't create an environment in which people want to do service that's individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. And when we're preaching Krishna consciousness, we should also learn how to make an environment, even if we only have a 30-second window of time. Through our detached mentality, that we want to do the greatest good for people, and part of that is not pushing them too far, that we can create that environment. And it's just a mysterious zone, because the soul has its own volition and can decide at any minute, I like this, I don't like that. And if we create that environment for people and they willingly come forward, it's very powerful. More about that later. On to the next part, 4.6, 1 through 2. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 6th chapter, verses 1. So, as we all know who have read the 4th canto, there was a great fallout from Sati going to that party at Daksha's house. What happened? Just as Shiva had predicted, Daksha was envious. He really couldn't tolerate Shiva at all, and although he didn't come, his wife came, and he snubbed her. He just completely ignored his beautiful daughter, and she became so incensed from this offense which he was committing towards Shiva through her, that she immolated herself through her mystic power. And then there was a huge fight. All the gangs got together and came in and started blowing up the whole assembly. A huge fight. Daksha got his head cut off. There was a rumble at the yajna. Rumble in the jungle. So 4.6, 1 through 2, all the priests and other members of the sacrificial assembly and all the demigods, having been defeated by the soldiers of Lord Shiva and injured by weapons like tridents and swords, approached Lord Brahma with great fear. And we're going to have a yajna here today, but hopefully none of that will happen. You don't have any rival gangs coming after you, do you? Because if you do, make sure we have our tridents and swords ready. After offering him obeisances, they began to speak in detail of all the events which had taken place. So they go to shelter to Brahma and Vishnu to see what, what do we do now? Both Lord Brahma and Vishnu had already known that such events would occur in the sacrificial arena of Daksha. And knowing beforehand, they did not go to the sacrifice. When Lord Brahma, this is verse 4, heard everything from the demigods and the members who had attended the sacrifice, he replied, "You cannot be happy in executing a sacrifice if you blaspheme a great personality and thereby offend his lotus feet. You cannot have happiness in this way." So in teaching Krishna consciousness, we have to understand basic principles that guide us. And one of the foundational principles is we must not blaspheme devotees. By the way, these first two principles that we're talking about fall within the 10 offenses against the holy name. What was the first principle? Where does it fall within the offenses against the holy name? Ninth offense, which is? Instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name. And then this one is? First offense, to blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives propagating the holy name of the Lord. And to make this point clear over and over again, this is efficient preaching, because we can transport principles wherever we go. The principle is axiomatic. It works in all times and circumstances, and this is one of them. And that is that you can't be happy if you offend devotees. Your sacrifices, whatever you're doing in Krishna consciousness, won't be fruitful. Nothing will be fruitful if you offend the devotees. So this is the first thing that they're teaching. Lord Brahma is teaching these devotees who have just had a huge fight with Lord Shiva and came badly beaten and wondering what to do next. So he says, you cannot be happy in executing a sacrifice if you blaspheme a great devotee. And we've talked about this many times in this class, and also it's important to bring up over and over again, because as Krishna mentions to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, living entities in the material world, none of you, but just in general, carry envy within their hearts. And that can be transferred to envy of Vaishnavas. And when one speaks with envy in one's heart, it's like a spear that can injure the body of another. So don't offend, don't blaspheme these great Vaishnav personalities. Then he says, you have excluded Lord Shiva from taking part in the sacrificial results, and therefore you are all offenders at his lotus feet. Still, if you go without mental reservations and surrender unto him and fall down at his lotus feet, he will be very pleased. So this is something that Srila Prabhupada taught us early on in the Krishna consciousness movement. First of all, that there will be disagreements. He said, don't think that there won't be disagreements between even devotees. He wrote a letter to Atreya Rishi Prabhu, who was a GBC, and who was appalled that there was so much infighting going on amongst the leaders. After all, they were young and they were ambitious, spiritually ambitious, and maybe, a little bit of other. And there were definitely altercations. And so he got disturbed, because he was a very kind of centered and inherently peaceful personality. Wrote a letter to Prabhupada saying, how is this spiritual? Spiritual means that everyone should get along and there should be no arguments and so forth. And Prabhupada wrote back and said, your idea is Mayavad. He said, because actually living entities have their own individual natures, and when they come together, there will be differences of opinion. It's natural. And he said there's anomalies even in the spiritual world. Then he gave these examples. He said sometimes Krishna becomes so bewildered by seeing Radharani that he accidentally milks a bull instead of the cow. And he said, so don't try to find utopia, even in the spiritual world, because that's what makes it interesting. A novel where you turn the pages and every day, same thing, perfect weather, there's no conflict. You just keep turning, and you say, okay, I'm not reading this novel anymore. What makes everything interesting is that there's some conflict, that there's some interaction and things like that. Of course, it should be purified and so forth. But first of all, principle in preaching Krishna consciousness is don't avoid conflict. Understand that it's there inherently because of the differences we have between our personalities. And so expect that. And the second thing is, when there is a misunderstanding, fix it. And how do you fix it? You go and bow down and offer your apologies. That's taking the high road. As a politician said recently in a speech, she said, when they go low, we go high. So you got to think like that, take the high road. And this is part of preaching. It's part of being effective in moving about the world and teaching Krishna consciousness, is learn to apologize to people. And if you've made an offense, the remedy is that you should go and offer obeisances as soon as possible. The sooner you do it, the less you suffer, and the easier it is to do. So it's better to get in the habit of going and apologizing to people. And if devotees are out teaching Krishna consciousness to others, and they happen to offend the sensibilities of somebody, don't be condescending and think, oh, I don't need to apologize to them. They're just some insignificant person. No, on the contrary, we should be the most humble, and we should beg forgiveness when we make some transgression. It goes over well in every segment of society, when one is humble and one begs forgiveness when one makes a mistake. So this is part of preaching Krishna consciousness, is to be humble and to remedy the situation when it comes up. So Brahma is saying, still, if you go without mental reservations and surrender unto him and fall down at his lotus feet, he will be very pleased. Reflections. Anything you'd like to say about this? Yes.
I like the point about where you said, criticizing, blaspheming the devotees, right? In my personal experience, right, what indirectly or directly it kind of affects your sadhana, because every time you try to look at a devotee, right, some kind of, you form notions about a devotee, and it lingers in your mind indirectly, which is not good for sadhana. So what I tell myself is, first look at yourself, for every mistake you point, there might be 100,000 mistakes in yourself, right?
Very good. In fact, that's exactly what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told his disciples. He said, before you criticize someone, look at yourself and see, is there anything there that is within me that I'm projecting on others? Thank you. Yes?
Prabhu, I really like the point about you made about apologizing not just to devotees but even to those who may not be practicing bhakti. Yeah, we shouldn't look at them in a condescending way. And secondly, I wanted to ask a question regarding the variety. Thank you for explaining how even in the spiritual world there is variety. If someone takes this point and justifies it, uses it to justify his or her tendency to stay in the material world. Oh, this material world, anyways, the miseries of this world make it an interesting place. So how do we counter this point?
Well, that's just stupid. Not your question, but the idea that one would stay in the material world. You're welcome to do, anyone's welcome to do so. Krishna says in the Gita, Yanti deva vrata devan pitran yanti pratir vrata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mam yachino pimam. He said, you can go wherever you like. Yanti, help yourself. But he does teach very clearly about the different results that you're going to get. In the material world, he calls the dukkhalayam. He says it over and over again. From top to bottom, this is not a place you want to stay. And so one can't make that. It's not because there's a variety here and there's a variety in the spiritual world that they're all the same. The point is that the material world is not our home. We're not compatible at all with this material nature. Although it does have some of the features of the spiritual world because it's a reflection. But just like I mentioned the other day when I was at Bhakti Williams' house, in Southern California, there was a little bird, and he was smashing his little bird brain against his little bird skull against the window over and over again because he saw a reflection there. And he thought, oh, here's an enemy bird, smash, smash. And we said, oh, isn't this, we should stop him. And Will said that, no, he comes every day. He's been coming for a year. And, we should help to distinguish for ourselves and for others the difference between the material and spiritual world, not make that mistake. One more? Yes.
Maharaj, thank you so much for bringing this point. The second point also about offending the great devotee. Once I was discussing with one of senior devotee, and I was asking that about this Ritvik people. So then he told that yes, they can never be happy because they are offending the great devotees. So we can see that, and they may be prospering something or other, but ultimately if they are offending the great devotees, those who serve Prabhupada and their mission through their whole life, then they can never be happy.
Yeah, in any circumstance, one's perspective has to be respectful towards Vaishnavas. That's what we call the Vaishnavism. We worship Vaishnavas. Why? Because, as Lord Shiva told Parvati, Tadhyanam Samarchana, the highest kind of worship is the worship of Krishna's devotees. Even Krishna says, Yad puja abhyadika, madbhakta puja abhyadika. He says in the 11th canto that, worship me is okay, but even better than that, worship my devotees, because they're most dear to me. And part of the psychology of it is that Krishna loves his devotees. He wants to do service for them, but they won't take it. Therefore, if somebody else does service for his devotees, then he says, okay, you're the most dear to me. And so one should become a devotee of the devotees. And if you find yourself in any situation, in a room, in a community, in a car, in a train, wherever it may be, where people don't have that kind of respect, you're in the wrong room. You're in the wrong car, you're on the wrong train, you're in the wrong community, period. Because that's a basic principle. We worship Vaishnavas, and we're careful about blaspheming Vaishnavas. And we talked about this principle of criticism. It's not that one simply reserves all criticism, because we have to be critical. We have to distinguish between one thing and another. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, and the motivation behind it. And that has to be observed very carefully. That means advancement in spiritual life, when one has that ability. Okay. Shraddha, I know you had your hand up. Okay. 4647. Persons who observe everything with differentiation, who are simply attached to fruit of activities, who are mean-minded, who are always pained to see the flourishing condition of others, and who thus give distress to them by uttering harsh and piercing words, have already been killed by providence. Thus there is no need for them to be killed again by an exalted personality like you. This is an interesting section, you know. All the harmed parties, all the people who got involved in this kerfuffle and the big fight and the rumble in the jungle, and they fought against each other, and they got all cut up and killed and heads chopped off and everything. They went to Brahma Shiva and Vishnu what to do. Brahma took them, he went out of his way to take all the parties, all the concerned parties who had offended Shiva to his abode in Kailash. And it's an interesting section to read when they approach that place, because it goes on for many, many verses describing the opulence of his abode. Lord Shiva sits under a huge banyan tree, or is it peepal tree? Banyan tree. 800-mile banyan tree. There's an 800-mile banyan tree behind the Hawaii temple, ISKCON temple. You can go see that sometime. You can live inside that banyan tree. 800 miles it is. And Shiva sits under this tree, and he was meditating, and they all came to him. So this is another symptom of advanced devotees. When something happens, you get everyone together, you talk about it, You find out who did what to whom, what went wrong, what's the principle behind the thing, and then you get everyone together. You make an assembly. Go to the person and say, okay, we're all here. We know what happened. We blew it. Let's talk about it. And, we'll work it out. We'll work it out. So what a beautiful scene that all these devotees are led by Lord Brahma, who's the most mature devotee in the universe. He's the leader, he's the father, and they all go to him and he says, okay, here's what we have to do. We have to talk this out. And this is part of the internal preaching of the Krishna consciousness movement. We have to come together to talk about things. It's really important to work things out. And when there's a problem, and when won't there be a problem, one has to get the parties together and talk. It's magical, actually. I've seen, since I've been in management for a little while, number one, that I'm aging faster, and number two, that there's always some opportunity to solve what are considered, by my mind, to be impossible situations. Impossible. I mean, there's no way this is going to work out. But I'm always amazed that when devotees come together with a willingness to talk about it, that something comes out of the mix. There's a synergy. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Is that how it goes? And when devotees come together in this kind of assembly that Brahma put together and came before Lord Shiva and said, okay, we just need to talk about this. Something really bad just happened and everyone blew it. So let's talk. You don't know what's going to happen, but one thing's for sure. When you try that with an open mind, then some solution can come out. And that's how we move forward, by fits and starts in this material world, and especially in the spiritual world. Don't think it's all just going to go in a straight line. You have to fight for every inch. And part of fighting in it for every inch in teaching and preaching Krishna consciousness is to know this technique of keeping the heart open and coming together to work things out. So, in the purport, Prabhupada gives this advice. Persons who are materialistic and always engaged in fruitive activities for material profit cannot endure seeing the flourishing life of others. What an opening line, huh? Can I read it again? Yes. Persons who are materialistic and always engaged in fruitive activities for material profit cannot endure seeing the flourishing life of others. Except for a few persons in Krishna consciousness, the entire world is full of such envious persons who are perpetually full of anxieties because they are attached to the material body and are without self-realization. Since their hearts are always filled with anxiety, it is understood that they have already been killed by providence. Thus, Lord Shiva, as a self-realized Vaishnava, was advised not to kill Daksha. A Vaishnava is described as paradukatuki, because although he is never distressed in any condition of life, he is distressed to see others in a distressed condition. Vaishnavas therefore should not try to kill by any action of the body or mind, but should try to revive the Krishna consciousness of others out of compassion for them. The Krishna consciousness movement has been started to deliver the envious persons of the world from the clutches of Maya. And even though devotees are sometimes put into trouble, they push on the Krishna consciousness movement in all tolerance. Lord Chaitanya advises, Trinadapi sunichena, toror api suhishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One can chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can... What is it? There it is. That's right there. Sometimes people wonder, devotees wonder, why can't I chant? Why don't I have a taste? It's right here. You have to cultivate these aspects in your life, these qualities. You actually have to cultivate them. And by doing that, one can teach Krishna consciousness, and one can go on chanting Hare Krishna. And I've seen it. I've seen it over the years. I'll just talk about in the realm of book distribution. I've seen people give up book distribution, and my observation was that they became either condescending or indignant with the people they were dealing with and not humble. And Krishna didn't let them continue. And I took that as a warning to be careful not that I've achieved anything of any semblance of humility, but it's a principle I can see that is vitally important in preaching and teaching Krishna consciousness. Is there a difference between preaching and teaching? Huh? Seems like there's some nuance. Every word holds some meaning, right? Some subtlety. Okay, so finally, a Vaishnav should follow the example of such Vaishnavas as Haridas Thakur, Nityananda Prabhu, and also Lord Jesus Christ. There is no need to kill anyone who has already been killed, but it should be noted herewith that a Vaishnav should not tolerate the blaspheming of Vishnu or Vaishnavas, although he should tolerate personal insults to himself. So that's a known principle, right? And also this idea that the person's already killed, you don't have to kill them. Don't make it worse for them. Don't make it, in teaching Krishna consciousness, they implicate themselves more. Be careful like a doctor. When doctors go out to the field to pick up somebody who's broken a limb, they lift them very carefully onto the gurney so that they don't injure them more. It's the first principle in the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take before they start practicing medicine legally and officially, and that is, first, do no harm. That's the first thing. Be careful how you're dealing with others when you go out into the field. And also, consider the fact that if someone needs to be dealt with, there's a universal system through which all living entities are dealt with. This is part of the vision of self-realization, and that is, everything is going on uniformly in the world. Nobody gets away with anything, either in front of everyone or behind the scenes. Cheaters cheat themselves because there's perfect justice within this world. And therefore, one doesn't have to try to rectify everything oneself when one's teaching Krishna consciousness. One can consider the fact that everyone gets their due. And this is part of the point he's making here. Don't try to kill someone. They're already killing themselves. Have compassion for them. So here's a quotation from the Adi Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita 7.99 that indicates how careful one must be when teaching Krishna consciousness, and is related to this instruction that Brahma is giving to Shiva. And Prabhupada writes in his purport, and I think it's the last paragraph in the purport, in personalist Mayavadis, and context is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has gone to see, what is his name? In Varanasi. Prakashananda Saraswati. And Prakashananda had been criticizing Mahaprabhu here and there, and his devote, and saying that he's just a sentimentalist, why isn't he studying Vedanta, and so forth. And Mahaprabhu arranged to meet them through his mystic potency, to get invited to go and see them, to protect his devotees, because they were in anxiety, hearing all this blasphemy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he wanted to rectify the situation. So he arranged for them to invite him, and they invited him to this big assembly of Mayavadis. So what did Mahaprabhu do when he came there? What was his preaching technique? He got up and he said, "You are all completely in Maya. You Mayavadis are just wrong-headed, and your philosophy is completely wrong." Is that what he did? No. What did he do? What was his preaching technique? How did he exhibit that humility? Yeah, it was in his, so in body, mind, and speech. Narada Muni says of body, mind, speech, in all ways one should express humility. So when he came into this assembly, he sat down in the lowest place you could possibly find. This is very significant in a culture, where you sit. You come in and it's like, sit on the highest place and, present yourself in a certain way. And Mahaprabhu came in he sat down in the place where people were washing their feet. Just say, I'm nothing. I'm the lowest of everybody in this room. This is a preaching technique. This opens people's hearts when you actually come in as a humble soul, not riding on an elephant, but come in and you sit down as like, I'm here just as a representative, but I don't know anything personally, and I'm going to take the lowest position. And once, when Yogeshwar Prabhu, he was telling me this about when printing books in the French language, and he had completed a book. It was a great victory. He was a little-known entity. He was always in the back doing translation work and helping with things. And he came into a room to show the book to Prabhupada, and there were a lot of big leaders there. And he showed Prabhupada the book. Prabhupada was very pleased. And he said, so you are the lead man on this project? And Yogeshwar said, no, Prabhupada, I'm the last man. And everyone in the room laughed. And Prabhupada said, this is Vaishnavism. Prabhupada, I am the last man. And so this feeling, taking this position while one's teaching Krishna consciousness, this is important. Impersonalist Mayavadis always try to defy Vaishnavas because Vaishnavas accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme cause and want to serve Him, talk with Him, and see Him, just as the Lord is also eager to see His devotees and talk, eat, and dance with them. These personal exchanges of love do not appeal to the Mayavadi sannyasis. Therefore, the original purpose of the Mayavadi sannyasis of Benares in meeting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was to defeat his personal conception of God. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, as a preacher, turned the minds of the Mayavadi sannyasis. They were melted by the sweet words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and thus became friendly and spoke to him also in sweet words. Similarly, all preachers will have to meet opponents, but they should not make them more inimical. They are already enemies, and if we talk with them harshly or impolitely, their enmity will merely increase. We should therefore follow in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as far as possible and try to convince the opposition by quoting from the Shastra and presenting the conclusion of the Acharyas. It is in this way that we should try to defeat all the enemies of the Lord. And a verse, just for good measure, from 1st Canto, 18th chapter, 48. This is one I always comes to my mind when someone really makes a sort of a transgression and my mind is disturbed. This verse says, the devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Don't be an avenger. You have to see it for yourself to believe it. We'll see it in each one of the languages next after this. Scroll down. Let's read it together. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. That's for good measure. And also, I'll point out from 552, this appears in Prabhupada's word-for-word translation of the verse from Rishabhadeva. And in the verse, he parenthetically, if you keep going down, in the word Vimanyava, which you just cut off just the very top, there it is, Vimanyava, without anger. So Prabhupada writes in parentheses, one must distribute Krishna consciousness to people who are hostile without becoming angry at them. Without becoming angry at them. So this is just a beautiful scene of Lord Brahma getting all the concerned parties together, coming to Lord Shiva and doing the right thing, setting the example, and speaking sweet words, taking the humble role, and talking to Lord Shiva to work it all out. And next we have 4648. My dear Lord, this is Brahma speaking to Shiva. If in some places materialists who are already bewildered with the insurmountable illusory energy of the Supreme Godhead sometimes commit offenses, a saintly person with compassion does not take this seriously. Knowing that they commit offenses because they are overpowered by the illusory energy, he does not show his prowess to counteract them. So this is one of the ways that we can have compassion, is to understand it's don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. It's circumstantial. And in the purport, Prabhupada writes, it is said that the beauty of a tapasvi or saintly person is forgiveness. What is it? Forgiveness. There are many instances in the spiritual history of the world in which many saintly persons, although unnecessarily harassed, did not take action, although they could have done so. Parikshit Maharaj, for example, was unnecessarily cursed by a Brahmana boy, and this was very much regretted by the boy's father. But Parikshit Maharaj accepted the curse and agreed to die within a week as the Brahmana boy desired. Parikshit Maharaj was the emperor and was full in power both spiritually and materially. But out of compassion and out of respect for the Brahmana community, he did not counteract the action of the Brahmana boy, but agreed to die within 7 days. Because it was desired by Krishna that Parikshit Maharaj agree to the punishment so that the instruction of Srimad Bhagavatam would thus be revealed to the world, Parikshit Maharaj was advised not to take action. A Vaishnava is personally tolerant for the benefit of others. When he does not show his prowess, this does not mean that he is lacking in strength. Rather, it indicates that he is tolerant for the welfare of human society. Now, this is something I've learned on book distribution. I mean, hopefully I've learned. But I've noticed that if I react to people with any twinge of anger, envy, trying to correct them in some way, that there's an inordinate reaction. And having seen several of these happen, I wrote about one in my book when I was in LaGuardia Airport. And I used to go there every day with my friend Pragosh. We'd drive from 340 West 55th Street Temple to the airport. I lived in New York for 3 years, and I only knew the route to the airport. Not much more. In any case, at LaGuardia Airport one day, I met an Indian gentleman, and when he saw the Bhagavad Gita, he just said like this, and I felt some anger in my heart. And I said, would your parents approve of the way you just acted? And because I said it with anger, not compassion, not considering the situation, he blew up and he ran off to the police station. And I spent, a lot of time, Krishna's time, an hour maybe, like talking about it, apologizing, telling the police I'd be more careful in the future and things like that. And then it's instances like those that helped me to realize and imprinted in my consciousness that don't react when that kind of anger is within the heart. There's a way of using anger in Krishna consciousness, but it's very rare. The example of Hanuman is given. But if I try to imitate that and get angry at somebody and say, yeah, that was for Krishna, there's a difference between using anger and losing your anger. You're losing your temper. Using your temper, losing your temper. So be careful, the Shastras are saying, about losing your temper. Better to err on the side of being humble and retracting, backing off from the situation if you're not sure. And this is beautiful. Forgive people. And forgive quickly. There are whole seminars about this, how it can change your life to learn to forgive people. For instance, I've talked about on the road. Is there an opportunity on the road to become angry with people? Because it's an impersonal situation. Like, if you're driving along, somebody cuts you off, let's say. And you might, it's possible that you could become, what would be the word? What would you become if you were a little disturbed? What would you say? Agitated, yeah, okay, you can become agitated. And why? Now, I observe it from a different couple points of view. One is that, let's say, you become agitated because you don't know who's in the car. If you knew them well, if they were your best friend and they cut you off, you just go, ha ha, I'm going to get you when we get back. You know, if it was your mom, you go like, Mom, would you cut it out? But if it's an impersonal entity, there's a way in which you can just express your anger indiscriminately. But if you realize there's actually a person in there, and what if I knew that person? What if it was my boss? Would you do it then? Hey, CEO, get out of here. Oh, sorry. The circumstances change, and our circumstances change also when we see what the living entity is and why they're acting in a certain way that they're acting. We have to be objective and see from that frame of reference in order not to become disturbed by people. And also, as I've said before, there's a mantra that I use when driving, and Nirkula is here so she can corroborate that I actually do this. If somebody makes, if she's driving and they cut us off, I'll say, I forgive you, or we forgive you. So even if I don't feel like it, I say it immediately, and then I feel fine right afterwards. So this forgiveness is a powerful a technique. Forgive people quickly. The quicker you do it, the less entangled you become in that energy of the material world that wants to drag you in and say, why am I a victim? Why do people treat me like this? This person should be avenged. I should take it out on him somehow. And people do that. They'll actually chase somebody down and ruin their whole life within 5 minutes. You could write a little booklet, How to Ruin Your Whole Life in 5 minutes. It's happened before. I read about it when I was in school up at Skyline College, and there was this motorcycle and a truck, and they got in an argument about who got what lane or whatever. The motorcyclist kicked the truck, and then the truck driver jerked his wheel and knocked the guy off the road, and he died. And the truck driver was an upstanding citizen with 3 children, never had a criminal record, nicest guy in the world, everyone said, but in a few seconds, he ruined his life. A manslaughter. He killed this person. And that can happen in the material world, so you have to be really careful what to speak of when teaching Krishna consciousness. You always have to keep that in check and learn to forgive the transgressions of others. Okay, 4.6.49. My dear Lord, you are never bewildered by the formidable influence of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you are omniscient and should be merciful and compassionate toward those who are bewildered by the same illusory energy and are very much attached to fruitive activities. So this whole section of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which the Daksha Yajna takes place and the aftermath, and during the aftermath things are worked out, is very instructive. There's a lot of dialogue there that we can take to heart, and many principles, several of which we've mentioned so far. Shall we take a couple of minutes for reflections? Anything that's stuck so far in this last section? Yes, Vishaka Leela.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much. I really like the point of using your anger versus losing your anger. And I was just relating to this beautiful pastime in Ramayana that I heard. This pastime where Lord Ram chases the deer, and then he, and then Lakshman and Sita hears Rama's voice, please save me, please save me. And Mother Sita tells Lakshman to go and search for Ram. He might be in danger. And Lakshman's very relaxed. He said that nothing could happen to Ram. I'm supposed to be here to protect you. And then Mother Sita says that, I know why you're saying this, because you've been secretly planning to enjoy me, and that's why you don't want to go. And at that point, Lakshman was really, really, he was heartbroken, he was insulted. And then he goes, and when he goes and he sees Rama actually scolds him. Why did you leave Sita and come? And then I was listening to this lecture, and this devotee made this beautiful point that Lakshmana was actually being insulted on both sides by Rama and Mother Sita. And he could have just, he could think that I have left my home, all the comforts, my wife behind, I'm coming here, even lost my sleep and serving, Lord Rama and Mother Sita. And this is what, I get in return. And he could have just lost, his anger, and he could have just left. But at that moment, he thought that Lord Rama actually invested 35 years of his life in, loving, giving care to Lakshman, and Mother Sita invested about 20 years. And so he went and he thought about all those years of love and care that he received from both of them, that he immediately, forgave the situation, and he continued serving. And the point that you made, it relates with that we may be in situations where people may say disturbing things to us, or be envious of us, but it's always good to take a moment and reflect and act on the relationship, rather than just acting in that moment and ruining the relationship. So
yeah, thank you. That was very helpful, giving that analogy. And I just summing it up, I would say that remember that the rewards come from within. Don't try to adjust the external situation, but remember that if we apply these principles of humility and we're trying to do the right thing, the rewards will come from within. Depend on the fact that Krishna knows exactly who did what, when, and who had what motivation, and keep the right motivation at all times. Yes?
Prabhu, I just wanted to read this, I think you must have heard this. I think they found it in Mother Teresa's his room or something, her room or something. It goes like this. People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyways. If you're honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyways. If you find happiness, my mom's calling me. If you find happiness, people may be jealous, and be happy anyways. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyways. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyways.
Nice. Okay. Mukharvind.
But that 552 always caught my attention as well. The one word that Vimanyava Prabhupada has given a special meaning. That has always been a yardstick for me whenever I go out. Like how Prabhupada is very clearly defines what does that mean, and so I really.
It's one of the benefits of reading Prabhupada's books carefully. You find these treasures. One treasure like that can guide your whole life. And if you find such a thing and you see that, wow, Prabhupada parenthetically inserted that. And you can actually commune with Prabhupada through that. Think, what was his perspective of this verse? How is he thinking of this one word? And then you can actually take that one phrase and keep it with you wherever you go and be guided properly. One sentence. Prabhupada said that we distribute books and people read them. He said one word. He said one sentence, one word. It applies not just to the people we're presenting to, but to ourselves as well. That if we read one word, one sentence, like in the Bhagavad Gita, I've often said, Mom, Krishna saying me, surrender to me, surrender to me. When you hear that word, we can actually commune with Krishna because there's no difference between him and the word as he's saying it. So it has so much power and meaning. Shraddha, there's a question on the internet. Everyone please say Hare Krishna to all the devotees on the internet. Hare Krishna!
So, Maharaj, before the question, can I add just a few lines to what Mukharvinda said about Vimanvaya? We once went out on book distribution and we met a person who was very anti-Krishna.
Anti-Krishna?
Yeah.
It's part of the anti-Krishna party.
Yeah, and I started explaining, being polite to him and all that stuff, and he just kept on getting more worked up. And in the end, he just said, please leave my house and go away. So I just got up to leave. And then Mukhavinda tried to pacify him more, and he became even more softer. And then he was like, she's soft, and then you are softer, and you were trying to. And the more we became soft with him, the more agitated actually he became with that. And finally we just...
So he tried to pacify him, and he became worse.
More worse, yeah. I mean, he was like so strong. And then finally we just said, okay, he's not ready, not a ripe mango. And
so this is a classic case, right? One for the law books. Okay.
Yeah, which I use all the time when I preach in corporations, because they ask me that, you go door to door, how is it like? And I say, we do get thrown out of the house because it's really insulting.
It's fun, right? It's just funny when people slam the door and sometimes it doesn't happen very much. It's so rare, but it's actually enjoyable. I mean, people open the door and they take a look at you and then they just close it right away, and I think like, what? What? I didn't say anything. Like, how could you tell? What? Okay.
There's a question from Hari Sankirtan Prabhu.
Hari Sankirtan, wow. The heavy hitters are checking in.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. This is the verse where you read that devotees don't seek revenge. But when we read the Mahabharata, Pandavas did seek revenge. So how do we understand that?
Now that's a big question that will be coming out in our next seminar. Okay, so next part is just such a, what's that? Vrindavan. Okay. Vrindavan, pass him a mic.
I liked when you were talking about forgiveness. That also reminded me, like, how even though Ravana tricked Rama and said to send Maricha to turn as a golden deer, and he tricked Ravana like that and took away Sita. Even though he said, even though if Ravana comes and surrenders, I will forgive him instead of killing him. But Ravana didn't surrender.
Yeah, I mean, Ram is so good, sometimes it's aggravating, right? I mean, it's like, what? You're kidding, you can't do that. Thank you. Case in point, he sets the absolute standard, does Rama, and we can see what it looks like to follow this absolute truthfulness, absolute humility, absolute forgiveness, and these kinds of principles. These come out from the Supreme Lord for us to see. Very nice point, sir. Okay, so I have to move, and it's Suniti. This section of the Bhagavatam everyone can relate to. In fact, even the gopis used to listen to this section and appreciate it very much. I'm on verse number 4.8.17, hearing about a tender child. How old are you now, Vrindavan? 9, 4 years younger than you, who went off into the forest with such determination. And because of his determination, he was able to get a spiritual master on the way, and then to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. So within this pastime, there are some very fundamentally powerful preaching points. 4.8.17. This occurs when Dhruva, as a young boy, goes to sit on the lap of his father, as a young boy might do, and he was permitted because of a political situation in the family. That is, his father had several wives, and one of them was considered to be the top wife, and it wasn't Dhruva's biological mother. So when Dhruva started to get up on the lap of his father, the way his brother was, she, that is Suruchi, prevented him from getting there and said, no, you can't sit there. This is for my son only. And he was so insulted that he began crying hot tears. He left that place in utter fury, and he went to take refuge of his mother. And here's how his mother preached to him. And this is a non-failing system for preaching in all circumstances. Okay, she was also breathing heavily. That's Suniti, his mother. And she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain." So the first principle is, don't become a victim, no matter how bad it is. Don't start getting into the revenge mode. Next thing, and oftentimes this happens, there's no remedy. Have you ever had that happen? You get in a situation, you go, there's no remedy for this. Arjuna, battlefield of Kurukshetra, no remedy. What do I do now? He just drops his bow and said, "I give up." Krishna, what do I do now? That's a nice situation to be in. In fact, in any creative process, there's a way in which if I'm engaging and I'm thinking, "Oh, I can write this, no problem," and then again and again failing, coming to the point of utter defeat, and say, "I can't do anything," that's when the ideas start to flow into the mental stream. Great things happen when one becomes frustrated and there's no remedy. Suniti said to Dhruva, "My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so, because the king, your father, does not consider me his wife or even his maidservant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman. And by being fed from her breast, you have grown up." So this is an effective way of preaching. First, accept the facts. Don't try to cover them over, but just look carefully at what situation you're in now. Is everyone okay? Okay. Accept the truth and present the truth. "My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother," this is 4:8-19, "although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother, Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshiping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So that's the line I wanted to present as it being infallible. The last sentence, "Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshiping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." If you don't know what to tell somebody exactly, this one can't miss. And oftentimes, he's just like, "Well, worship Krishna." And Prabhupada says it oftentimes. When devotees write him letters, say, "This is happening, that's happening, this is a terrible situation." Prabhupada said in one letter to Jayananda Prabhu, it's the same old answer, chant Hare Krishna. It's like, have you tried that? Hansapriya. Same old answer, chant Hare Krishna. So, just tell people, look at Krishna's God, you're not.
Once I was going through the hard time, and Keshav Bharati Maharaj happened to be visiting, and he saw that I wasn't doing well, and his instruction to me was, "You are on the right path. Keep trucking."
Keep trucking. Keep on keeping on. Yeah. Okay, so these are such sweet words from the mother, and partly I like this section because it mentions that she wasn't exactly sure what the remedy was, but she gravitated towards this principle that just surrender to Krishna. And Gajendra was in a similar situation. He had a crocodile in his leg, if I'm not incorrect about that. And he didn't know what to do. Crocodile wouldn't let go. And we'll find ourselves in a situation like this at some point in our life. Crocodile's on the leg. Crocodile won't let go. It's not going to work. Whatever I've tried, I fought. It doesn't work. Then what do I do? And no remedy in sight. Gajendra started praying. And at that point, he wasn't even sure who the Supreme was. Mm-hmm. And this is an important point because he just from his heart, he called out to the Supreme without having a clear idea. And the remedy was at hand. So, purport is, the harsh words used by Suruchi to her stepson were true because unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve any success in life. Man proposes, God disposes. Suniti, the mother of Dhruva Maharaj, agreed with her co-wife's advice that Dhruva engage himself in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indirectly, the words of Suruchi were a benediction from Dhruva Maharaj, for because of the influence of his stepmother's words, he became a great devotee. Suniti continued, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshipping his lotus feet, your great-grandfather Lord Brahma acquired the necessary qualifications to create the universe. So keeping that in mind, that ultimately all solutions come back to surrendering to Krishna, taking shelter of Krishna. And as we're teaching Krishna consciousness, remembering that. Sometimes in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, teaching, one may try to adjust basic details in order to make it attractive to more people. And in doing so, there's always a possibility of retracting so much, taking so much off of it that we might even forget to teach about Krishna consciousness. And I remember once when Rabindra Prabhu was giving class in Los Angeles, and he mentioned this phenomenon, and how for so many years he said he had been in back rooms talking to different devotees about how to take Krishna out of Krishna consciousness to make it more attractive to the public. And then one day he just realized, we'll just leave Krishna in and see what happens. Not that there can't be nuance and sensitivity to our environment and culture and so forth. That's called realization. That has to be there. But one has to have this Suniti principle, and that is, remember that Krishna is the active ingredient. Out of all the other ingredients you see on the label, the hundreds of other fillers, there's one active ingredient in Advil. I don't know what it is, but apparently it works. And similarly, in our Krishna conscious movement, there are many different parts and moving things, and in our preaching, but ultimately it's the Krishna principle. And it comes out so nicely in this dialogue, doesn't it? With Suniti, she's simple, and she just says, well, I don't know what to do, but, everyone says take shelter of Krishna, so, and your stepmother said it, there's a grain of truth in that. Take shelter of Krishna. And it's like, all right, I'm going to the forest. So what a success story is that, from that one grain of truth. So why not hold on to that? So, on 4/8/21, Suniti informed her son, your grandfather Swayambhuva Manu executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby with unflinching faith and devotion he worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success of material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation, which is impossible to attain by worshiping the demigods. 4/8/22, my dear boy, you should also take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is kind to his devotees. 4/8/23, my dear Dhruva, as far as I'm concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose eyes are like lotus petals. There it is. I mean, that's nice preaching. Prabhupada used to mention about Malati's daughter, Saraswati, yeah. Actually, I met her one day when I was distributing books at LAX airport. I had no idea who she was because she had grown up, and I was showing her a book. And she said, oh yeah, my parents know something about this. They taught me. And I said, really? What did they teach you? She just looks like a college student. So she started telling me, and I said, really, who are your parents? She said, Malati and Shamasundar. I said, wait a minute, you're Saraswati? Because I used to hear Prabhupada say that preaching means what Saraswati's doing. She was just a little baby at the time, and she would go around and tell people, do you know who Krishna is? And they go, who? And it's the Supreme Personality of God. I said, Prabhupada, that's preaching, that helps. And this is sort of the vein this is in. Keep that in the center. Keep the active ingredient going. Don't be afraid to say Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because it makes a lot of sense. Everything's in there, and people actually want to know about the Supreme Personality of Godhead ultimately. Last part, we're on the final stretch. Is everyone okay?
Yes.
We'll take a couple of reflections. And everyone make sure you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, there's chairs and everything you can take shelter of in the back. Manjulakanta, okay. Aditya and then Manjulakanta. Prasant,
He
then
raised his hand.
Manjulakanta, then
He raised
Prasant.
his
If he raises his hand again, we'll grab him.
Hari
Go
Bol.
ahead.
Thank you, Maharaj. Forgive quickly, right? I had a message that was sent by my wife recently. Every now and then we have an argument and then we go into the silent mode. But I thought this WhatsApp message that she sent is very relating. So she sent, if persons of best quality and nature ever become angry due to some reason, such anger is momentary. In the case of persons of average quality, the anger lasts for 2 prahars, 6 hours. And in the case of persons of lower category, it lasts for a day and night, 24 hours. But in the case of most wicked and bad persons, it never leaves them. They always remain angry.
This is scientific. That's brilliant. I love that. Please send me that verse. Where's it from? Ayurveda or something?
No, she quoted from some Shubhashita and it's Uttamasya Shanam Kopam.
From Shastra, right?
Yes.
Perfect. That's good. That really helps. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Very true. And if you can cut it down to like half a second, what kind of situation? This is transcendental. Don't keep it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. There were so many points. So the one I liked was you mentioned that Suruchi was actually not very sure what the solution of the problem was, but she gravitated towards the solution that you go and worship Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I like that point.
Yeah. It's really dicey in this world trying to figure out how to do. But if you just keep taking shelter of Krishna and gravitate in that way, then you'll be on the right track. Okay, Manjulakanta.
Maharaj, you were talking to us to point out that the mother was not quite sure of anything, so she pointed out the one thing she was sure of, that we should listen, we should pray to the Lord. He will save us. But I was listening to the whole thing and I was thinking, she beautifully said it. She said she's very attached to the child. She doesn't see a material solution to the problem. And she gives him the one solution that she understands. She would have applied to herself. She gives him, and then she supports it with these 3 statements. And she says, your great-grandfather, Brahma. And I was listening to that, I was thinking, man, this is Brahma's great-grandson. Nobody gets away from trouble in this material world. You are going to live a life where you're going to have problems. And things are not going to stay. I mean, you'd think that Brahma had it easy, but he woke up and he didn't know what he was doing. So starting from our greatest father who created, all the way down, everybody has these rough waters. And we're all going to have to go through them. It's not easy. But the beautiful way in which she says that, if you can, unlike other material people who when they face a problem, they think, how am I going to break out of it? What am I going to do to fight my way through it? Me. The focus is me. I think I can do something about this. I just need to find out what it is I do. And she lets go. For us, raised materially, we're all told to hold on. But she teaches to let go and then hold on to the Lord. He's not the cause of the problem. He may not even be the solution to the problem. But if you hold on to him, then there is no problem. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just reminded me the first time we read the Bhagavad Gita and I came to the section where Arjuna was completely disappointed and put his bow down, and then he turned to Krishna. And I could really relate to that. And then the answers started coming so clearly. And it's just a really satisfying situation to be able to finally take shelter, sweet surrender. It's like, I give up. No more of these superficial kinds of fixes, but now I'm going to take the whole thing and just take shelter there. A happy day. Okay, so the last stretch we're in is that 4:8:25 through 45. And that is that after Dhruva leaves the palace, and what a scene, 5-year-old little prince just out the door and into the wild. And with that kind of determination, Krishna notices. So the text mentions how Narada overheard the conversation. How's that? Because, Prabhupada says, Krishna is within everyone's heart. And when one has such determination as Dhruva, and the circumstances are focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the solution is going in that direction, then Krishna informs another living entity to come and help that person. We see at the Bhagavatamrita, Radharani notices that there's this Brahmin who's struggling to try to find the truth, and sends Gopakumar and says, go guide him. In this case, Krishna sent Narada Muni and intercepted this little boy heading off into the jungle and said, hi, can I help you? Where are you going? Started teaching him, and actually he tested him first. He tested his resolve, some Brahminical instruction, and telling him the way that you overcome this is by interacting with people properly. And when you meet somebody of superior quality, then you worship them, you listen to them. Somebody of the same stature as yourself, then you make friends with them. Somebody of lesser stature, then you give them mercy and you help them and so forth. And Dhruva Maharaj said, very good instruction. Sorry, can't follow it. Got to go. Then Narada could see very clearly that he was determined. So this testing takes place. We see in different places in the Bhagavatam this kind of a preaching of, especially a teacher to a student, offering certain kinds of solutions or particular instructions, and seeing, will the person take it or not take it? Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit.
Prayashchit, yes.
Yeah, and telling Parikshit Maharaj that the solution to all sinful activity is to counteract it through the Karmakanda section of the Vedas. And Parikshit goes, nah, I don't think so. And so there's this, in preaching, it's a dynamic situation in which the person may have more knowledge than can only give a certain amount, and may have to test the person that he's teaching and see, what can this person accommodate? And so this is an aspect we see in this particular pastime. Then moving on to 4:11, 7 through 35. There's this whole section when Dhruva Maharaj, fast forwarding greatly here, after he attains success in the forest and becomes anointed as a king and so forth, and then his brother gets killed by a yaksha, and Dhruva goes off to avenge him and begins killing not just the yaksha who apparently killed him, but also as many other yakshas as he could. And basically he went too far. So Manu came and started preaching to Dhruva Maharaj. 4:11:7. Lord Manu said, my dear son, please stop. It is not good to become unnecessarily angry. It is a path to hellish life. Now you are going beyond the limit by killing yakshas who are actually not offenders. So this is kind of a remarkable section. Dhruva Maharaj met the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally. He's a pure devotee. And then he's because of the occupational hazard of living in the material world, there's every chance that one can be implicated this way or that. And so one lesson here is that one should always have mentors. One should always make sure that one's under good guidance. Even in the higher stages of life, or especially in the higher stages of advancement in devotional service. We know that Vidura was a pure devotee in his own right, but he took shelter of Maitreya, and Prabhupada writes that devotional service and the spiritual science is so subtle, you must always have this superior guidance going on in one's life. So even if you're Dhruva Maharaj, you must be in a position to accept this mentorship and move forward. Then we get 4:14, 12 through 34. That's 4:14, 12 through 34. And the sages to Vena. Vena was a bad kid, to say the least, problem child. And he used to kill his friends while he was playing with them because he was so cruel. He'd torture animals and so forth. And he didn't get any better as he grew up. He was just a bad seed. And his father, Maharaj Anga, left home, went off to the forest because he couldn't handle it anymore. And Vena became king. And then he started terrorizing everyone, stopping sacrifices and so forth. So the sages came to Vena. The saintly sages came to him, and they told him that you have to stop this. I'm going to summarize. Basically, he didn't accept their summary, and they used their Brahminical power to what? Yeah, through mantra. So that's the only bona fide way that you can kill somebody. If you can make your mantra so powerful that just by saying a mantra the person drops dead. Sometimes one might wish one had such power, right? But this is also an extreme measure. When one's in a position of responsibility, it's not just tolerate everything that goes on. If there's some complete nonsense and aversion to the Vedic culture, the preaching has to be that the person has to be removed from the post. We can see this happening when when you're Goshti and Undis and you have a preaching movement. If somebody's doing something that's completely against the Siddhanta or hurting the community, then the preaching has to be surgical, as the sages were when they did this. Although they were very forgiving and they gave him every chance, he transgressed. Am I not calling on you? Is that why you're coming up close? So Vena. I'm giving you a medley of various circumstances coming into the end. Prithu Maharaj in 4:15:22 was praised by the citizens as he was inaugurated, and he said, I haven't done anything yet, so don't praise me. He said it's actually a kind of digression if you praise somebody and they haven't actually earned it yet, so he wouldn't accept it. Prithu to the shape of a cow, 4:17:22. Again, showing that direct words and threatening removing her from her position with his sharp arrows is sometimes the preaching that's necessary. Vaita Maharaj once said, a non-violent policeman, of course nowadays this statement may be a little, he said a non-violent policeman is not wanted, but the kind of violence that is done judiciously in order to protect others is what a Kshatriya is supposed to do. And if you find a policeman and says, oh, sorry, let's just forgive him. And meanwhile, the person's killing your family, it's not wanted. And he said, and a violent priest, that is not wanted. So everyone has to. Oh, I didn't know you were all going today. Okay, well, let me just close then by saying that unfortunately, Narada to the Prachetas. You look at 4:31:9, and when Narada speaks to the Prachetas, we've run out of time. Yeah, we've definitely run out of time, and that's to be continued. So now we have a short presentation given by the SASS, which is speaking, as Shastra says, from the representatives of Dhruva Maharaj, who went to the forest when he was 5 years old. So we'll clear the stage here, and we have how many